It was the night of April 20th, 1989, when the call came in. A head-on collision on Highway 200, a desolate stretch of road in rural Montana. No fatalities had been reported, but the situation felt strange, like something wasn't quite right. I didn't know it then, but I was about to step into a case that would follow me for the rest of my career. When I arrived at the scene, I could see the wreckage of two vehicles. One belonged to a local woman, Carol Heights, who was sitting at the roadside, shaken but unharmed. The other car was still running, its headlights glaring into the night, yet its driver was nowhere to be found. I walked toward the vehicle, and as the light from my flashlight cut through the dark, I noticed a figure standing on the other side of the road. A woman, her face expressionless, stared blankly into the distance, as if the crash hadn't even registered with her. She looked like she was in a trance. I called out to her, but before I could get close, she turned and walked into the open Montana plains, disappearing into the night. We would soon learn her name, Patricia Meehan. The other driver, Carol, had been shaken to the core by what she had witnessed. She explained that the woman, Patricia, had been driving the wrong way down the highway, speeding toward her in a seemingly deliberate manner. Carol had tried to swerve, but it was too late. The cars collided. After the crash, Patricia got out of her car, looked at Carol briefly, then walked away as though nothing had happened. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She just vanished into the darkness. We began our investigation, and the first stop was Patricia's home. Patricia Meehan, 37, was a transplant to Montana from Pennsylvania, where she had been a well-liked and respected woman. She had been working as a ranch hand, far from her life as a photographer back east. Something had clearly changed in her, though. Friends reported that in the months leading up to the accident, Patricia had become increasingly withdrawn and erratic. They mentioned she seemed to be struggling with something, a deep internal battle. She had even sought therapy, but no one could have predicted what would come next. I started gathering evidence, piecing together the timeline of her last few days. Patricia had spoken with her parents the day before the accident, sounding perfectly normal, even excited about an upcoming visit. But the crash changed everything. After that night, Patricia Meehan seemed to evaporate into thin air. The leads came in slowly at first. Search teams combed the area near the highway, looking for any sign of her, but it was as if she had vanished into the Montana wilderness. No footprints, no clothing, nothing. It felt like we were chasing a ghost. And yet, people began to claim they had seen her. Sporadic sightings in small towns, truck stops, diners, always of a woman matching Patricia's description, wandering, lost and confused. Each report added to the sense of unease surrounding the case. I interviewed everyone, ranchers, travelers, people who had been in the area that night. One trucker swore he'd seen her hitchhiking days after the crash. A waitress in Bozeman claimed Patricia had come into her diner, ordered a meal, and left without a word. Each time, we followed the leads, but each time, we came up empty-handed. Patricia was always just out of reach. The more I dug into Patricia's life, the more I realized she had been battling something unseen, an inner turmoil. She had once been vivacious and creative, but something had shifted. Friends hinted at depression, a sense of isolation, a need to escape. But escape to where? And why? After the accident, did she choose to walk away without a word? The twist came when I began to suspect Patricia hadn't disappeared by accident. She had planned it. The accident, the walk into the night, it was all part of a deliberate act, like a ritual of leaving her old life behind. But that theory left me with more questions than answers. Why fake her own disappearance in such a public and bizarre way? Was she fleeing something, or had her mental state deteriorated to the point where reality no longer felt real? Months passed, and the case grew colder with each passing week. Patricia Meehan became a phantom, haunting the edges of Montana's small towns, her face appearing on missing person posters, her name whispered in rumors. Despite the numerous sightings, we never found her. No one ever got close enough. She was always on the move, like a shadow. Years later, I still think about that night on Highway 200. I remember the way Patricia had stood in the darkness, staring into the night as if something was calling to her, something only she could see. The truth, I believe, is locked inside her mind, a mind that might never be found again.